Hey Adventurers, so today's going to be our wrap-up for the month of May.
It should be a short one for both of us because we had a lot going on this month. So the first book I read was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by, I don't remember who you got. It's a well-known book, I'm not worried about that. I listened to this one on audiobook and I think that I wasn't awake for all of it, quite honestly. It was really interesting that the way that time travel was done in that story, and I think I liked that aspect of it, and I liked the feel overall of the book. I was concerned it would be really, really creepy or dark, and it didn't strike me in that way at all. I did have a lot of questions that weren't answered, and I know that there's many other books in the series, and I also am aware that if I slept through part of the book, then that would explain why I have unanswered questions. But I was just confused on why things were happening. I did get some characters confused at some point. So, I don't know. I don't think I really want to continue with the series. I didn't love it that much. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on it.
So the first one that I finished in May was Book 5 of the Rune Lords, which is Sons of the Oak. This is by David Farland. This is a big fantasy series that I've been reading through or listening through with Nico from Nico's Book Reviews. I don't have a review out for this one or book 3 or 4 out yet, I don't think. Because I think because I'm still in January for reviews. But this one is so far probably my favorite of the series. And it's the beginning of a new arc. There's some things left over that are being closed out from the first 4 books, and then this next book starts a new storyline. And I think it's my favorite of the 5 that I've read so far.
I also read Wolf by the Ears by Anne Rinaldi. This is a book about Thomas Jefferson's slaves in Monticello, his farm plantation. I don't know his house. I'm not sure what the right term is. Estate? Sure. And it was dealing with the topic of, equality, and these are slaves who were mixed. It was a question that was never answered, whether or not this main character that we followed was actually one of Thomas Jefferson's illegitimate offspring, was an illegitimate offspring of Thomas Jefferson. Let me phrase it like that. It was never answered in the book, but
It's different.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was historical fiction I've had in my shelf for a long time, and I was really in the mood for historical fiction. And it was told in a journalistic style way, but less. A lot of times in those types of stories, they're really short excerpts that you're reading, and these are much, much longer, more full. And I don't know, it was interesting to follow. So the particular main character we're following is very white in appearance. She is known as a black and she's a slave, but that's the whole issue being dealt with in the book, is she's kind of that gap between someone who is white by heritage and someone who's black by heritage, and she's both. And so this is bringing up questions and people in the book who are wondering, like, okay, we have someone who's both. How is it right to enslave the black people? So I don't know if this was based on a true story or based on characters that, a lot of times people base historical fiction off of people's names that authors have read or seen, and then they just imagine what their life could have been like. So it was dealing with that kind of issue, and seeing the perspective from the people around her were really interesting. And she ended up, her goal in the story, or something she was considering, was trying to pass as a white person, but that would mean extricating her from her home. So that's kind of like the premise of the story, is where is she going now that she's grown. So I don't know. It was an interesting historical fiction because it was dealing with some interesting topics, but it took me a while to read it. I don't know. I didn't love it, but I was happy to read it. I like historical fiction.
The next one that I finished was a reread for me, and that was For the House of Hades, which is book 4 in the Heroes of Olympus by Rick Riordan. What do I have to say about this book? I don't know. I like this series. There's a lot I really like about this book. Specifically, I think book 3 of Heroes of Olympus is my favorite of the series, but I have to reread book 5 again before I remember for sure. This one does, I don't know. I've read these before. It was just I don't know why I reread them. I think maybe Captured in Words was doing a read-along for him or something like that, or for the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, and so I just continued on from there or something like that. But I decided to reread these, and I enjoy them well enough, and they're good audiobooks. So actually, I will say this, the audiobook for House of Hades was a different narrator than had been for Percy Jackson and the Olympians and the first 3 books in Heroes of Olympus. And that really, I did not like that at all. I thought that the new narrator did not do nearly as good of a job with the narration as the other guy did, even though the other guy feels like almost immature in the way that he's narrating it. It fits the world better than this guy was, so just interesting. All right.
So the last book I read this month was Mindset by Carol Dweck, and this is a nonfiction about people who, it's basically exploring the idea of that there's 2 mindsets and sometimes there's an in-between. That of a person with a fixed mindset who thinks they can only go so far as their talent carries them, and then that of a growth mindset, someone who wants to learn and who likes a challenge and is seeking after a challenge. And just comparing how far the 2 people with the different mindsets go, what their limitations are, and just what success looks like for people with those 2 different mindsets. So it was really interesting. I learned a lot from it. I think that the author approaches it in a very black and white way in the sense. The section that I thought she did in a very black and white way is how to raise children with a growth mindset. It was very interesting, something to consider. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but I definitely think she has some very valuable points to consider. And as adults, I think it's a really great book to read.
I've got 2 books left. The next one is The Lost World, which is the second part, or the second book in the Jurassic Park duology, and by Michael Crichton. This one, very different from the movie. Obviously, it felt like what they did with the movies is, for the first movie, they mixed the 2 books together and made a movie from the 2 books. And I didn't realize that until I had read the second book, and then I see how many similarities there are. But let's see, what do I want to say about The Lost World? I don't know, I liked it. I think that it was a very different type of story. It wasn't quite as much of a horror book as Jurassic Park was. I just don't have thoughts on it today anymore. I don't have thoughts at the moment. The last book that I finished, though, was Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. This is a Star Wars novel. This is one that I've had on my shelf for a very, very long time, and that I've needed to read for longer than that, and that I've wanted to read for longer than that. This is his canon series on Thrawn. He wrote the Heir to the Empire trilogy, or the Thrawn trilogy as it was previously known, that took place after the events of Return of the Jedi, and then Disney bought Star Wars and did away with all the extended universe. And so that series is now Legends, although it's being slowly brought back into canon, and I don't need to give you a whole dissertation on Star Wars. But Thrawn, I liked the book a lot. I loved the character of Thrawn. I liked his, not really sidekick, his partner, Eli Vanto, I thought was a great character. You get a lot of good insight into Arinda Price as a character, who is a character that shows up in Rebels and is very unlikable in Rebels, and you see why she's that character that she is through this book. It was very slow, purposefully very slow, but it was also not good slow, it was boring slow. And not so boring that I didn't want to continue reading it, but it was not as spectacular as I was really hoping it was going to be. And I think maybe next books in the series might be better about that. And I do plan to continue reading, but this one was not as good as I was hoping it was going to be, but still plenty enjoyable. So that is our wrap up for the month of May. Yeah. Not very many books we read. We both did a lot of traveling, and it's just a very busy month, and I didn't get hardly any physical reading in. Well, I did. I got a lot of physical reading in, but not nearly as much as I'd have liked, and I didn't finish any books physically. So, yeah.
Thank you all for watching an Erudite adventure and coming along on our little tiny book haul, or month wrap-up adventure.
We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and have our social medias linked in the description down below. We will see you guys again soon. Stay well.
Bye.